Hey everyone, it's George Couros. Welcome back to another episode of the Innovators Mindset Podcast. What I'm going to discuss today is thinking about behaviors not only in the classroom, but also as adults in how we interact in our organizations, our schools, and even on the basketball court. And this lesson I'm going to share with you was taught to me by a student. And I'll get to that in a second. But I want to start with these questions just to get you to consider something. And this is based on a blog post that I've written, and it is linked down below. And I just want to kind of talk it out with you, but you can read the entire post if you want to kind of dig into it more. But these are the questions I want to follow on. Do we hold some people to an impossible standard and others to unrealistic expectations? And when we do, what environment does that create in your classroom, school, or organization? The quote I share at the beginning of the blog post is this one from W. Edwards Deming: "A bad system will beat a good person every time." I want to share that with you just to kind of put it in your head as I'm sharing two separate stories. And the first was on the basketball court. As I've mentioned several times, I know people are sick of hearing about it. I used to ref basketball. It is one of the best leadership lessons you can have. If people are yelling at you while you're running, when you're a school principal the next day, doesn't seem as bad. But I remember I had started reffing college basketball. It's a higher level. And we're doing this game. And typically what happens, but prior to the game, the refs get together. They will talk about the coaches, what they know about them, what to expect. What I remember from the referee, he said this to me, and I'm paraphrasing this. I'm not reading it exactly from the blog post. I'm trying to tell this from memory. He said, just so you know that this coach basically will yell at you the entire time. You just got to ignore him unless he says something really egregious, something really negative. Don't even pay attention. That's just how he is. So I thought that was a little bit weird. There's a reason I thought it was weird, because of a lesson I learned earlier as a teacher. So I remember we talked about the second coach, and basically my partner said, he doesn't really say anything, so don't really worry about him. So the game is going on, and this is kind of sitting in the back of my head. The other coach on cue yelling nonstop. And there's a difference between just kind of talking to your players, he's yelling at the refs the entire time. He's getting on you, he's on your case, trying to basically bait you into something, trying to curry favor, and he's not doing great. There's a difference. I used to coach basketball, and I'll tell you, I talked all the time. I was very thoughtful of when I spoke to the refs, and that was a lesson I learned early in my coaching career. So this is going on, and basically it's just noise. It's just noise. You're not really paying attention to what is going on. And there's a little side note that I learned from this. When people talk all the time, but they don't really have anything to say, you just ignore them. And it's a really good lesson for social media. People just constantly posting, trying to get something out there. Eventually you just kind of tune them out, because that's something that you don't connect with them anymore. I have really tried to basically talk when I have something to say, because then I think it will carry more weight. Now, again, who listens to this podcast, I don't know. Hopefully, if you do, shout out to you for listening, whoever that one person is. But it's just something I think about quite often. So the game's going on. And I remember my partner made a call, and it wasn't the best call. And we all make mistakes as refs, coaches, players, doesn't matter. But it was against the other coach who wasn't saying anything, and he got mad. And he started going at the official, and immediately he got a technical foul. Now, a technical foul is when you're doing something that's unsportsmanlike. And I'm sitting there watching this whole thing thinking, that doesn't seem right. Like, this guy has been on us the entire time. And then this guy says one thing that was not that far off from what this person said once. And he gets the technical foul. So I'm not in a place, honestly, where, because I'm trying to figure out the game still. I'm trying to figure out, and this is a veteran official. It was something that bothered me. So I look back and I think about, why did it bug me so much? And it was basically from something I learned from a student in a classroom. So I won't tell you the student's name, but I remember her vividly, and incredible student. One of the highest academic standards that you could actually have. And I always caution, I don't say smartest kids, because I believe that some of our top academic students in our classrooms are not necessarily the smartest kids in the classroom. That's a different thing. It's basically academics is, this is a student who does well in the things that we measure within schools, right? Some of the smartest kids you have in your schools don't necessarily do well academically. We have to understand that. But this kid was academically just did really well, awesome extracurricular, awesome community member, was just an awesome kid, really, really awesome. And she had extremely high expectations for herself. I will tell you this about me. I have high expectations for myself. That is something I sometimes don't worry about the criticism of others, because I'm going to give it to myself way worse and probably to a detrimental point in some cases, but that's a whole other podcast. But she just had really high standards. And I remember one time in class, she had said something kind of rude. And I just immediately like, hey, you know better, right away. Just said something really quickly and was kind of sharp. And she's like, yeah, I know, I apologize. So it doesn't happen again for a long time. So fast forward a few weeks, a few months later, and something happens again. And I immediately get on her. And I wrote this, I wanted to read this. And again, this is from memory. She looked at me and she said this, Mr. C, I'm good 99% of the time. And if I make one mistake, you get on my case. But other students in class are constantly disrupting. And if they are good once, you praise them. That doesn't seem really fair. And she was right. It hit me so hard, because it was like, hey, you are expected to be perfect. And then if students who are maybe causing some issues in the classroom are good, sometimes I praise them, but you do something wrong, I get on you right away. And it was something that really struck me. Now, it's something I think about. And I was a little nervous to post this, because, someone's going to say, oh, people have different circumstances. Yeah, we all have different circumstances, 100%. We also are all individuals. One of the things that I'm very passionate about is, as a school administrator, I don't think that every consequence or every action deserves the same consequence. There's so many factors that go into stuff, but there is expectations for behavior, right? There is expectations for, what we say and what we actually, try to share. And this student influenced me so much that I thought about this in the context, because let's not even talk about students. Let's talk about adults in schools. And probably, and I don't want to say everyone who listens to this is like awesome. I hope so. But a lot of people that are listening to this probably are very interested in education, want to do well, because they're spending their own time listening to a podcast on education. And sometimes you are held to a standard that almost feels impossible. Whereas someone who basically doesn't care, maybe is, gets into issues, they're actually praised again when they do something right. I wrote about this in Forward Together, and I talked about basically a lot of times we spend 80% of our time on 20% of our people, but what we should be doing is spending 80% of our time on 80% of our people. And I wrote this. What do we often do the 80%? The people that are really doing their best to bring out the best in our schools. Ignore them, or sometimes even punish them by adding more work to their plates, because we know they are likely to say yes with a smile, while slowly pushing them to burnout for doing a good job. What you promote shifts the responsibility to focus on what we permit as a community. Elevate to 80% and we'll get closer to 100%. That is something I think about all the time, is that we punish people for doing really well when they fall off once in a while, whereas sometimes there's an inconsistency. Like, we won't ask someone who we know is negative to do something in our school because, we're going to push back and just don't even bother. And I wrote this in the post because people are watching carefully what gets corrected, what gets ignored, and who gets treated differently. They start to wonder, does consistency matter here? Do expectations apply equally? Why try if I'm going to get punished or going to be punished for a simple mistake? Again, I think, and I struggle with this post because expectations are different. There, because I think we set expectations for ourselves. We're at different points of our lives, things like that. But just I go back to that student and how unfair she saw that she is expected to be perfect while having someone be good once in a while was the standard set, and it's so far off and out of whack. And I end the post with this: when we excuse poor behavior long enough, it becomes normalized, and when we punish excellence too often, it becomes unsustainable. Great classrooms, teams, and organizations are built by creating cultures where everyone knows they matter, everyone knows they are capable of growth, and everyone is held to standards rooted in respect. And I think that's the bottom line, is that respect. When you go back to that coach, there was a lack of respect towards the officials. Perhaps that coach had issues prior, and maybe that's why. But the standard was so different. And I remember that coach talked the entire game, saying stuff. The only time he stopped talking when he started clapping because the other guy got a technical foul. And it's something that always bothered me, and I'm grateful for that student for pointing it out, because honestly, if she didn't, I probably would have kept that up. And again, she had really high standards for herself, and I understand that, but it's just something I'm wrestling with. And I think with all the conversations about behaviors in the classrooms, what they look like, what we expect from students, I think it's a good conversation to have, with our colleagues, not only for our classrooms, but for our schools. Anyways, I just want to share that with you all. You can check out the blog post down in the notes below. But thanks for all that you do. I really appreciate you being here, especially if you stay to the end. And the only way, if you stay to the end, you heard me say that. So thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.